Next time I make one of these, I have to make sure my mic is working before I start recording a 6-minute video. Hello, everybody. My name is Kai. This is Kai Likes Linux, and welcome to the Kai Likes Linux questions and answer special for 100 subscribers. I got about 7 questions. 4 of them are in one screenshot. So we will go through these one by one, and this won't be a super long video, but longer than some of my other videos, so, not the worst case scenario. I thought this would be like a 30-second video, but with the questions I got asked, I think this can be expanded for 5 to 10 minutes, so I think that's a great amount of time. We have 4 questions to answer, 7 questions to answer by 4 people, I should clarify. Now, I will put the screenshots to each question right in this general area to the side of the screen, which is why my camera is off-centered today. And I will be answering all 7 questions with every bit of opinion I have, even though I already tried recording this 3 times, because I'm terrible at YouTubing. So, let's get right into this. Question number 1. What is your opinion on Windows 10 debloat scripts? I knew this was going to come up at one point. A Windows 10 debloat script is a script that people use to remove the excess telemetry and like all the extra bloat and things that make Windows 10 slower, basically. If it makes Windows 10 slower, that's what the debloat scripts are doing. Debloat scripts, amelioration, and even rain meter are all proof that Windows 10 is just a horrible operating system. I mean, yes, they exist. They make Windows 10 a better operating system, but the fact that they have to exist and Microsoft just doesn't remove the bloat themselves and keeps in the bloat, yeah, we have to just say, Microsoft, shut up. Your Windows 10 operating system is dead because these scripts exist in the first place. On Linux, you can have something as tiny as TinyCore Linux with a graphical environment and basically lose out on you wouldn't lose out on too much. You would lose out a good amount of things, but I mean, it's not the worst case scenario. TinyCore Linux is actually still good if you want to just use basic web browsing tools, and that's it. So, if you want something for grandma, get them TinyCore Linux. That's my opinion. Don't get them Windows 10 PC. Windows 10 needs to be debloated. It's slow, it's laggy, rain meter is painful to work with at times, but at the same time, it's the only way to properly customize Windows 10 unless you're wanting to spend several hundred hours trying to fix it. So, yeah, Windows 10 debloat scripts are, I know beyond just the debloat scripts, but there's not a lot to talk about on the debloat scripts alone. They just remove the bloat from Windows 10, and it's just proof that Windows 10 is a horrible operating system. That's the fact. Next question by the same person, Charlotte. What's my opinion on ReactOS? ReactOS is basically a Windows 95, 98 replacement for people who love that kind of look, yet still want to use modern Windows 10 applications. And for me, it's perfectly just fine. It's 100% open source. We can add our own desktop environment, and with enough work, we can basically do whatever we want with the system. The only problem I really have with it is that it's a little buggy and a little problematic to work with. I wouldn't recommend it for anyone who's not a complete operating system enthusiast, including for those in the Windows ecosystem, but ReactOS is perfectly fine as is and only crashes mild. It only crashes only a couple times only a little more often than Windows 10 in the first place. So, you win some, you lose some. What's my opinion on Windows-esque looking operating systems? Linux distributions, I should say. Windows-esque Linux distributions are... I wouldn't recommend them to anybody because they're just more or less just proof that Linux is better than Windows 10. The fact that we can replicate everything Windows 10 does to a T, yeah, that's perfectly fine. I think that works really well for us. But at the same time, I wouldn't say that these Windows Linux distributions do anything special. They just kind of give us proof that Linux is the better operating system ecosystem. Because we can mimic Windows 10 and still show that we can make Windows 10 from the ground up and it'd be just as good as Windows 10, if not better. So Yeah, sorry, Microsoft. You really have to fix your shit, dude. The first three questions just were basically proof that you can go fuck yourself. What's my favorite Linux distribution? It depends. It depends. My favorite overall would definitely be it's a tie between Elementary OS and Fedora. For looks, I prefer Elementary OS. For functionality and programming, I prefer Fedora. And those are the two I mostly use. But if I want to something like what recommending to new users, I'd probably go with Linux Mint. Actually, it is actually the easiest Linux distribution to learn for as a beginner. Linux Mint Cinnamon, to be exact, and especially if you're coming from the Windows ecosystem. And the fact of the matter is, yeah, Linux Mint is problematic, but it's still easy for the general user. And I would more recommend it because for Fedora to get the proprietary software that people use, you need to do some hacking and all that. While in Linux Mint, they keep it free and open source, but you also have the option to install proprietary software without having to go through a couple hoops first, which is it's not bad on Fedora. It's not the worst situation if I were to have to pick between Arch, like any Linux distribution other than Linux Mint. I would probably pick Fedora for a beginner because it's not hard to get that proprietary software, but it's just easier on Linux Mint. So I think that's where everything should go. Also, dpackage installation. More people will figure out how to install a dpackage file than they will an RPM. I know that's going to make some people feel insulted, but it's mildly easier, which mildly easier is all we really need to say. That's what we can recommend for a new user. So basically, for me, it's Fedora or Elementary OS, and for recommending new users to come to Linux, I'd recommend Linux Mint. So that's all the questions I have from my friend Charlotte. Let's move on to the next question. The next three will be individual screenshots of questions instead of, yeah. What is my favorite programming language? My favorite programming language, this is a question from the Awesome 98. But my favorite programming language, it would depend on a lot of factors. But my favorite overall is the V programming language. It works just fine. It does everything I need it to, and it gives me a free open source UI library that is designed by V to work with V. So, it's not a perfect situation. You could definitely, there's definitely a lot of work needing to go into all of V, but it's only on 0.2 point something or whatever at the moment of my recording. So for where it's at right now in development, it's not bad. Also, there seems to be a push for GTK applications coming to V, meaning I could make a desktop environment in V shortly, even though VUI I wouldn't say is perfect for that situation, but it's possible with VUI. It will just take a lot of time and effort, longer than it would with something like GTK and Qt. For interpreted programming languages, however, I would have to say Ruby. That would be Ruby. Yes, JavaScript and Python are up there, but Ruby is by far better than both of them because I really like unless functionality. Because, well, most programming languages are just like, oh, you get for, while, if, else, elif. Then that's it. Ruby adds that one special feature called unless, which basically is the opposite of a while loop. But, I mean, it's perfectly fine. It works perfectly and it does what I need it to do. And it makes it a little bit more readable in my personal opinion. Oh, and for transpiled languages, it really would depend if it's a markup language or a programming language. If it's for programming languages, it'd be TypeScript to Lua, because I just like it going to Lua, and I think it just works just fine. It gets TypeScript into binaries quite easily. Even though I don't particularly like Lua all too much, it's perfectly fine. And for markup languages, it'd be Memel, my own personal project. I mean, yeah, I'm kind of being biased here with that, but I mean, Pug is fine. It's fine, but it's not my personal thing. And I just prefer how I made Memo with the Lisp-like syntax and the extra features I plan on adding, plus the fact that it's treated like an actual compiler with an actual programming language not made in JavaScript, and also doesn't need a JavaScript file to run. That's one of my main problems with Pug, is the fact that you need JavaScript in order to run Pug. I really hate that. I despise that, in all honesty. It's like the worst idea imaginable. Question 3. How am I doing? I'm doing fine. I'm almost at my manic state, which means I should be getting back up and going with all of my moods again. My antidepressants are going well. My nightmare meds aren't working particularly well right now, but I'll talk to my doctor about that later. So I'm doing pretty fine, I guess. It's not a horrible situation. I'm doing much better than I'm usually doing, so that's actually really good. And the final question for today, which do I think is better, Solus or OpenSUSE? Also, you need to capitalize the U and E in SUSE. Also, yes, it's pronounced SUSE, not SUSE or SUSE. If you say it wrong, I'll be mad. And even I might not tell you off completely, I won't tell you off, but I'll be angry. I promise. Anyways, Solus versus OpenSUSE. There's a lot of factors to think about whether or not which is better, Solus or OpenSUSE. It really depends on what you're doing. For desktop use, I would say Solus, mostly because EOPKG is pretty decent. However, the lack of a built-in C compiler does turn me off. Even though, yes, you can install it, I don't like the fact that you have to install a C compiler to get a C compiler. And I haven't used OpenSUSE a lot, so I don't know if they do the same thing. But a C compiler like CC or GCC or CLang, any of those are a mandatory addition to your operating system, like it or not. You have to add a C compiler by default. There should be no reason for you to remove the C compiler from your operating system. I don't use OpenSUSE enough to say, oh, but they don't do the same thing with that. But if they do, I'd be really pissed. OpenSUSE uses KDE by default, while Solus GNOME is probably my favorite of the three of them. I would have to say Solus by the end of it, mostly because they're pretty similar in distributions, and I prefer EOPKG over Zipper, which is RPM based. I don't know what EOPKG is based off of. But Solus has far fewer packages because they're very strict on what packages get through. And I both like that and hate that. But that's a story for another day, maybe. But this was a wonderful 13-minute little thing of questions and answers. Thank you all to everyone who asked a question. I hope you got the answer you wanted. And if you want to ask more questions, I will probably do this again for my 500 subscriber special. Or maybe I'll do a Draw My Life. I'm not 100% sure yet because it depends on when I get there and whether or not I am willing to actually share what happened. But in my life, because there's a lot of my life that I don't want to talk about, let's be honest. Everyone has those secrets in their life. And so, maybe I'll do that one day. Maybe I'll keep that for 1 million subscribers, who knows. But I will see you in the next video, everybody. Have a wonderful day.